So let's talk about the Washington Commanders because, look, I'm good friends with Chick Hernandez, and we talked before the season, and I thought that there was something interesting about them, and it was a pump the brakes situation. So we're now beyond the halfway mark. They're 7-2. What are your thoughts today about the potential for this team?
Well, it's been a stunning progression for them this year. If you go back to 1 year ago at this time, they had just sold off their top two defensive ends at the trade deadline, trying to bottom out because they were bad, and they were going to be firing their coach and their entire staff and starting over, and they were trying to add as many picks as possible to sweeten the pot for a new GM and a new head coach to come in here. And then they hired Adam Peters from San Francisco, who was the assistant GM to John Lynch, and then they brought in Dan Quinn for his second chance as a head coach, the former Atlanta Falcons head coach who had been the DC in Dallas. And at Quinn's opening press conference, he wouldn't use the word rebuild, but he said that they were recalibrating. And it was pretty clear that they felt like, based on the current roster, which went 4-13 and picked second overall, that they were in for a really probably lengthy process, right? Maybe you're more competitive, you solidify your roster with the guys you want, and you're better than 4 wins. And the owner, I was sitting in a press conference on the final preseason game, pre-game presser, said, we expect to be better than we were last year, but I don't necessarily need this team to be in the playoffs this season, right? This is going to take time.
Right.
And now you fast forward, and they're 7-2. Quinn might be the coach of the year. Peters is probably the executive of the year as of this moment. Jaden Daniels is the rookie of the year, who they took second out of LSU and is in the MVP chase, and they're legit. I mean, this is a very, very good team. I would say only the Detroit Lions right now in the NFC are better than Washington, which isn't to say that anybody couldn't beat them in the playoffs, but if you're doing some type of power ranking resume right now just based on this season so far, I think you would have to have the Commanders near the very top of the conference, behind only Detroit.
Oh, well, Detroit is on a different level. I think we all agree at this point. Detroit looks like an absolute machine. They have more touchdowns than incompletions since the third week of the season. We're starting week 10. It is just incredible. Grant Paulson, Grant and Danny, 106.7 The Fan in Washington, D.C. You mentioned the new owner. What is the impact of ownership here?
It's everything. The whole ball game. Prior to Josh Harris with Dan Snyder, even when things were going okay in fleeting moments, which was almost never, you didn't feel like there was any real chance for hope because they did not have the infrastructure of the program in place that was necessary to win in the National Football League. Dan Snyder never hired and empowered a general manager to choose a head coach and then allowed that football person to run the football operation. That's what happens in good programs. When owners are involved, you guys know a little bit about this, more than they should be. See Dallas with Jerry Jones as an example over the last 30 years and what a joke they've become. It does not work. You need to hire and entrust people who run football outfits, who have football knowledge, who are talent evaluators. They never did it. Yeah. And so this is the first time really since Snyder took over in 99 that they've tried it that way again. And lo and behold, it's working pretty well. Now, it doesn't mean you immediately get to win, right? You got to pick the right people. And to some extent, there's a little magical carpet ride that they're on right now. Like they've got some of that lucky pixie dust, whatever you want to call it, going where sometimes it's just if you get the quarterback, nothing else matters. And it seems like maybe they got the quarterback too. But I think that the whole world is different here because when Dan Snyder was the owner, the then Redskins or Commanders, let's say, could have handed a fan a water bottle. And they would have said, oh, there's a little bit of, this bottle that doesn't have water in it. Like, what happened?
Right.
And now if Josh Harris hands you the same water bottle, you go, man, this is the greatest water I've ever seen. I can't believe you're nice enough to give me this water bottle. So when you kind of operate that way with that type of optimism and hope, it changes a lot of things. And I think from the top down at every level of the organization, that's what's happening.
Yeah, I want to get to maybe the fan reaction and all of that in a second. But let's get to real quick football. The addition of Marshon Lattimore. Now, maybe he's not the 4-time Pro Bowler, automatic shutdown corner of the past. I don't see any reason why he can't be that, certainly with the energy of moving up however many spots in the standings to go from where the Saints are to where Washington is right now is obviously huge. But what does he do? Is his impact more than just having one of those cornerbacks?
Well, I think it is. First and foremost, they were bad at corner.
Right.
That was their weakest position, and they're now better at the area where they had the biggest issues. So that in and of itself, really, really easy way to get better. Where are we not good enough? Let's go get a really good football player. And that's what they did if Lattimore is healthy, 4-time Pro Bowler, as you mentioned. This is a guy who's been a lead in All-Pro at one point in time. He immediately gives you a chance to help out. Elevate by everyone else bumping down the depth chart. Their number one corner, Benjamin St-Juste, over the last several weeks is not a number one corner. He's been moonlighting in that role and struggling. He should be a number two. So now he becomes your two. Mikey Sanderstill, they drafted out of Michigan where he won a natty title last year. He was playing outside. He's really a nickel corner. That's what they drafted him to be. Now they get to move him back to the nickel. So there's a lot of situations like that where everyone gets to be a little more what they should be, asked to do a little bit less. But here's the hidden beauty of bringing in Lattimore, in my opinion. Adam, they're bad against the run, and I think this is where they're going to get a lot better quickly. Dan Quinn really hasn't been allowed to run a lot of man coverage, which he likes to do. It's been mostly zone.
Okay.
That's how the league's trended anyway. But if you have Marshon Lattimore, maybe you can tell him, hey, you go run around next week, let's say, with A.J. Brown. We're going to let you shut down half of the field. And maybe we have to help St-Juste on Devontae Smith some weeks, but some weeks it's the Steelers say Sunday.
Yeah.
And you're going to cover George Pickens, and now we don't have to double on the other side because we're not as convinced in their wide receiver 2 situation. And now I can bring, instead of 2 high safeties, 1 down into the box, and Jeremy Chin can help us as an extra linebacker. And we can – this is a team with some light box numbers that are among the highest in the league this year because they've got to play 2 deep safeties, and they've got to help their corners that aren't very good. Now they can play the run a little more because – they've got a corner that doesn't need a whole lot of help to shut down a good wide receiver. I think that's the hidden potential secret sauce to this trade.
Grant Paulson, 106.7 The Fan in Washington, D.C., is joining us here on the Adam Gold Show. Now the stretch, Steelers this week, at Philadelphia next week. I'm not saying that winning the division is paramount, but, man, it's a great opportunity with 4 games left with Philly and Dallas. Not that Dallas is going to challenge for the division, and Dallas not only is bad, but they're probably not going to have Dak. I don't think they're going to have Dak Prescott the rest of the year. So maybe that's a foregone conclusion at this point. But the opportunity against the Eagles, even up there, because I think Philly is a bit of a question mark, although they can run the ball well. Just what are your thoughts are on this stretch?
Well, I think this is going to be the most telling 2 games that they've had all season, for sure. I love the Steelers matchup on Sunday. Even though I'm not convinced Pittsburgh's as good as their 6-2 record, I don't love their offense. It's very mediocre. And I don't think Russell Wilson is that good, although I will say he's played very well the last couple of weeks. So I don't know that they're necessarily going to be a championship-level team, but this is a championship-caliber defense, and that's what I want to see play against Washington's offense. The best defense they played so far this season was Chicago in their last home game, and they won that game on the Hail Mary that everybody saw. But prior to that Hail Mary, they had 12 points.
Yeah.
And they moved the ball up and down the field all day. I think it was maybe their most yards in the season this season, and it was the most yards the Bears gave up. So they actually did some good things in terms of 20-20, like making plays, moving the football, but they didn't score. They were bad in the red zone. They are one of the 7 or 8 worst teams in the red zone going into this past week in the NFL. Had a better week against the Giants. So that's something I want to see. If they're going to go into the playoffs and win or make any kind of a run, it's going to be on the back of this really elite, stellar offense. And when they've played the better defenses, they have not necessarily finished drives. So the Steelers game, that's my storyline. That's what I'm excited about, just seeing how they handle Pittsburgh. The Eagles game, now we're talking about the division.
Yeah.
You win that game, you're in the driver's seat. You already have an edge on them going in, assuming you win this weekend. And as you said, hosting a playoff game doesn't really happen around here. They haven't been in the playoffs since 2015. They have not won a home playoff game since January of 2000 against the Detroit Lions 24 years ago. In fact, they've only had in this stadium, that was the only home win ever in their current nearly 30-year-old stadium as far as playoff wins. And I believe they've only had 3 or 4 playoff games total. I'd have to look that up. But I think it's right at 3 playoff games. So it would be a really cool thing for them to win the division, host a playoff game, rather than having to go on the road.
All right, final thing. And I went to school at the University of Maryland, so I was up there through the mid-late 80s, and I lived in the Baltimore, Washington area until the late 90s when I moved down here. It's been a long time since there's been fun for the fans. I mean, even when they were good, I think you alluded to it, it was always, especially with the most recent owner before this one, there was always a scandal somewhere or criticism that had to be dealt with. First time the fans in a long time have had fun with this football team. Can you sense that?
Oh, definitely, yeah. I mean, the only thing I would say negatively, if that's a thing, is there is a little bit of a realization or feeling, for me at least, having been here the entire time over these last 30 years, that whether it is the Snyder years and just the embarrassments and the controversies and the sagas and the statements and the legal wranglings, one after another, maybe it's the name change as well. I think it's certainly a significant part of it. I do believe that the fan base is smaller than it once was, and they're going to have to win sustainably.
Yeah.
Not just 1 year, but for several years probably to bring that back. And I don't know if the fan base will ever be the same, in terms of size as it once was, because there are people that are still upset or just don't like that they're not named the Redskins, or that don't like the current name. Maybe they were okay with the name change, but they thought they did a bad job on the rebrand. So that's part of it for sure. You're seeing some of that. But I think mostly, right, even if to use political parlance, like the tent is smaller, the party under the tent is pretty fun right now.
Yeah.
The people that are left are going crazy, and they've been waiting so long. We get callers every day into my show in D.C. that are 25, 30, young 30s. I'm 35, by the way. I have a couple of kids. I've never seen this team be good, ever. They've had a couple of fleeting years, as I said, where they would win 5 in a row, 4 in a row, 7 in a row at the end of the year, make the playoffs in 2005, 2007, 2012. Even most recently in 15, they had to win 4 straight to get in at 9 and 7. That's kind of always been how it's been. They sneak in, and then they lose right away, or maybe win a playoff game a couple times, but not since I was in high school. So we're in uncharted water for a lot of fans of this team. And even for the older fans, I think they just stopped believing that this was possible. So it's pretty incredible.
It's been fun. It's fun to watch. I keep reminding people this. Some of us have a ticket on Washington to win the division, and that would be fun. Grant Paulson, 106.7 The Fan in D.C. Grant and Danny, I appreciate your time, sir. We'll talk again.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you, Adam. Be good, man.
You got it. You too. Grant Paulson here on the Adam Gold Show.